Hi, I'm Rhea Talbot, and this is the part no one wanted me to say out loud. After my sister's funeral, my mother threw a box into the lake, like it was trash, like it didn't have a heartbeat. She said it was a mistake. She said correction was love. But when I opened that box, what I found wasn't just horrifying, it was breathing. A baby. My sister's son. They tried to erase him. They nearly erased me. And the question I keep asking myself is, how far would your family go to stay respectable? Would they kill the truth just to protect their name? Or have they already tried? The lake always smelled like metal after the rain, cold, still and sharp. I stood there with my shoes half sunk in the damp grass, pretending to watch the water instead of the casket. People whispered behind me, trading rehearsed condolences and quick glances at the family that looked too composed for a funeral. My mother, Vera, kept her spine straight as a ruler, a small black hat shadowing her face. She'd spent the last week planning every flower, every speech, every photograph for my sister's farewell. It looked less like grief and more like a press event. I didn't belong in that picture. I was the extra, always had been. The quiet Talbot girl who never quite fit the glossy image my parents built for themselves. Isolde had been the one with a laugh that carried and a heart too big for that house. I used to think she was the brave one. Now she was the one buried in silk, and the rest of us were supposed to move on like nothing cracked. When the priest's voice faded and the crowd began to disperse, I stayed back. The sound of heels on gravel, car doors closing, polite murmurs fading down the hill, it all blurred into one long, steady hum. Only when it went completely quiet did I see her. My mother walked toward the water, alone. The hem of her coat brushed the wet grass, and her gloved hand held something small and rectangular, wrapped in white cloth. At first, I thought it was a keepsake, a box of letters maybe, or something of a soul she couldn't bear to keep. But the way she looked around made my stomach tighten. She checked behind her, scanned the path, then stepped closer to the edge. And then she threw it. No hesitation. Just a quick, clean toss into the dark lake. The box hit the surface with a dull thud and began to drift. My breath caught. She stood there for a second longer, watching it move away, then turned and walked back toward the car. Her face blank, empty, as if she'd erased something she didn't want to remember. I didn't move until the black sedan pulled away. I told myself it was grief, that maybe she just needed to let go of something symbolic. But the image stuck. The sound of that box hitting the water wouldn't leave my ears. By late afternoon, the guests were gone, and the sky dimmed into that strange gray-blue color that makes everything look faded. I told the caretaker I'd left my scarf by the lake and walked back alone. The wind had picked up, carrying that raw scent of pine and mud. I kept telling myself to go home, that I was being paranoid, but my feet kept moving. Down by the water, the lake looked heavier, darker. The surface barely rippled. I scanned the reeds near the dock and froze. There it was, the same small box, caught in the thick weeds, half submerged. I hesitated, then stepped closer, my boots sinking into the mud. The air around me went still. And then a sound. A faint, broken cry. For a second, I thought it was a bird, or maybe the wind cutting through the reeds. But it came again, so soft it didn't seem possible. I moved faster, reached for the box, my hands shaking as I pulled it free. The cloth around it was soaked, the wood slick and cold. I pressed my ear closer. Another cry, weak, desperate. No, I whispered, fumbling at the lid. It was nailed shut. I searched my coat pockets for anything sharp, found my car key, and jammed it between the seams. The lid splintered. I pulled it open, and my world tilted. Inside, wrapped in a soaked towel, was a baby. Tiny, barely breathing. His skin pale, lips bluish. His eyes fluttered, unfocused, and a small, trembling breath left his mouth. For a second, I couldn't move. Everything inside me went silent except for one truth screaming in my chest. This was real. My mother had thrown a living child into a lake. The next moments blurred. I tore off my scarf and wrapped him tight, holding his fragile weight against me. His chest moved, shallow but steady. "Hold on," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Hold on, sweetheart." I ran toward the car, slipping on the wet grass, my heart slamming against my ribs. The baby made a small noise, a whimper like a question. I laid him across my lap once inside and cranked up the heater. Driving through Asheville that evening felt like driving through a dream that didn't make sense. The trees blurred into streaks, the sky bruised purple as the sun gave up. My hand shook on the wheel. Every time I glanced down, I saw him still breathing, his fingers twitching like he was holding onto the world by sheer will. I remembered Isolde then. Her laugh, her defiance, her voice that used to echo through the house when she argued with Vera. She'd said once, "Mom thinks control is the same as love." I hadn't understood it until now. I thought about the day she told me she was pregnant, how she'd whispered that she was scared but happy. Vera's reaction had been a quiet storm. The arguments behind closed doors, the cut-off calls, the missing months. And then, news of complications, a funeral with a script. My throat tightened. What if this was the complication? What if the child she died for hadn't died at all, but had been treated as a scandal to erase? The baby stirred. I turned on the defroster, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're safe now," I murmured, not sure who I was trying to convince, him or me. "You're safe. I've got you." The hospital lights came into view ahead, glowing like a promise. I parked haphazardly and ran inside, shouting for help. A nurse looked up, startled. I think I said something like, "Baby and lake," but I'm not sure it made sense. My knees nearly gave out when they took him from my arms. I stood there, drenched and shaking, watching as they disappeared behind the yard doors. I felt hollow and weightless all at once. I couldn't process it. The sound of my mother's calm voice at the funeral still echoing in my head, the way she'd said, "A family should know how to grieve with grace." Grace. There was nothing graceful about drowning the last piece of my sister. When the hallway emptied again, I pressed my hands against my face. My coat was soaked, my hair stuck to my forehead, and the only sound I could hear was the steady hum of the heater vent overhead. Somewhere behind those doors, a child fought for air. I walked to the waiting area and sat down, clutching my scarf like a lifeline. The water had stained it darker in places, the pattern almost gone. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. I didn't know what would happen next, if the hospital would call the police, if Vera would somehow find out I'd interfered. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. When the nurse came back to ask my name, I lied. "Rhea Talbot," I said softly. "I found him near the lake." Her brow furrowed. "And you have no idea who the child belongs to?" I hesitated. My voice came out like smoke. "No, but I think he belongs to someone who isn't here anymore." She gave me a long, knowing look, then nodded and hurried back. I stayed there, watching the corridor, counting every second. I didn't even notice when the rain outside started again, light against the glass. The world felt smaller, quieter, like it was holding its breath with me. And then I remember the last time I saw my sister alive. She'd hugged me tight, whispered, "If anything ever happens, promise me you'll listen for what's real." I hadn't understood her then either. But I did now. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered to the empty hallway, "I heard you." The automatic doors opened, letting in a gust of cold air. I stood, legs trembling, and followed the sound of voices into the bright light beyond. I stepped into the ER clutching him like he was the only truth left in a family full of lies. The air inside the emergency room felt colder than the rain I'd just escaped. I didn't remember how I made it through the automatic doors, only the sound of my shoes squeaking on the tile and the heat from the small body pressed against my chest fading fast. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in sterile white. A nurse behind the counter glanced up, startled, when she saw the bundle in my arms. "Ma'am, do you have an appointment?" "He's not breathing right," I said, my voice scraping out of me. "He's freezing." "Where's the mother?" another nurse asked, already frowning. I don't know." That was enough to make everyone freeze. Someone hit a button. I heard a code word I didn't understand. Two nurses moved toward me. They didn't take the baby right away. They looked at me like I was a question they didn't want to answer. One of them whispered to the other, "No ID, no record?" "He was in the lake," I said louder, desperate for them to move. "Please, just help him." The taller one shook her head. "Ma'am, you can't just show up with a child." "We have to." "Then arrest me later." I snapped. "Do whatever you need to. Just help him now." That did it. The smaller nurse stepped forward, hands out, her tone suddenly steady. "Okay, We've got him. She took the baby, wrapped him in a dry blanket. I heard the first real cry as she rushed him toward a side door. The sound cracked something inside me and I slumped against the wall, my arms empty and trembling. Minutes or maybe an hour passed. Time didn't move the same in that waiting area. The same cold light fell across the plastic chairs, and the hum of the vending machine filled the space where I should have been thinking clearly. I stared at my scarf, now wrinkled and half-torn, wondering how the world could still be running outside when mine had stopped somewhere near the water. "Hey," a voice said gently. I looked up. A woman stood there in navy scrubs, her hair tucked under a cap streaked with silver. She wasn't young, 50s maybe, but her eyes were sharp, kind in a way that didn't demand anything from me. "I'm Nurse Jackson," she said. "Luella. The baby's stable for now. They're warming him up and checking vitals." My knees almost gave out from relief. "He's alive." "For now, yes," she said, motioning me to sit. "You did good bringing him in, honey. Some people would have looked away." I sank onto the chair, pressing my palms together. "They almost didn't take him." Luella nodded slowly. "Rules. Paperwork. I've seen enough of it kill people who could have been saved. Sometimes you just have to act." Her calm voice eased the shaking in my hands. She sat beside me, not too close. "You said he was in the lake. You find him yourself." "I found him near the reeds," I said carefully. "Wrapped in a towel. I thought it was. I don't know what I thought." She studied my face. "And you don't know who he belongs to?" The lie came easier than I expected. "No. I found him by the water." Luella's eyes softened. "All right. For now, that's enough. I'll handle the questions if they come." She stood, gave my arm a quick, firm pat, and disappeared back through the double doors. I sat there staring at the wall clock, the second hand moving like it had a purpose I couldn't see. I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over my father's number first. He didn't answer. It went straight to voicemail, his calm voice saying he'd call me back later, like always. Then I scrolled to the next name, Mom. I shouldn't have called. I knew that before I even hit dial. She picked up on the third ring. "Rhea!" Her tone was clipped, like I'd interrupted something important. I swallowed hard. "It's about Isolde's baby." A pause. I could hear her exhale through her nose. "What about it?" "I found him. He's alive. You threw." "Stop." Her voice sliced through mine, controlled and cold. "That was never meant to be your problem." I couldn't breathe for a second. "My problem? He's a child, Mom." "A mistake," she said simply. "A mistake must be corrected." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "You call this correcting?" "You don't understand," she replied, her tone even, almost soothing. "There are things you can't undo. He never should have existed. You'll make this worse for everyone if you don't keep quiet." I hung up before she could finish. The sound of the disconnect echoed in my head like a gunshot. For a long moment, I just stared at my phone, my pulse hammering in my throat. When Luella came back, she must have seen my face because she didn't ask what happened. She handed me a paper cup of water and said, "He's breathing easier now." "Does he have a name?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not one anyone will say." She tilted her head. "Then give him one for the record." The words hit harder than they should have. I thought of my mother's cold voice, of a house that smelled like polished wood and secrets, of my sister's laughter filling it anyway. "Talbot," I said finally. "Call him Talbot. For now." Luella wrote it down without a question. "All right then, Mr. Talbot. You've got a fighting chance." When she left, I moved to the small window in the waiting room. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the pavement still glistened under the streetlights. Cars came and went. People carried coffee cups and tired faces, all of them going somewhere, while I stood here holding on to the one thing my family wanted gone. Somewhere between the quiet hum of the hallway and the faint beeping of monitors down the corridor, I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was furious and certain. They could rewrite every story, every obituary, every family history they wanted. But they weren't taking this one. I turned back toward the double doors where they'd taken the baby. "Keep fighting," I whispered. "You're not alone anymore." When Luella returned again, she smiled softly. "He's warming up just fine. We'll keep him here for observation. You should rest." "I'll stay," I said automatically. She looked like she wanted to argue, then nodded. Suit yourself, but get some sleep in that chair before you fall over. She left me alone again. I sat down, folded my arms around myself, and closed my eyes. My mother's words wouldn't leave me. A mistake must be corrected. No. My mother had erased him once. I wouldn't let her do it again. I didn't sleep the night after the hospital. Even when the nurses said Malric, yes, I was calling him that now, was stable and warm and breathing steadily, I couldn't make my body rest. I sat in that plastic chair for hours, legs curled beneath me, coat still damp around the cuffs. My mind kept looping back to that phone call. The sentence. A mistake must be corrected. How many times had my mother said something like that growing up? Not always with those exact words, but in that same tone. When Isolde refused to wear the pearl necklace to a gala, she needs correction. When I dyed my hair auburn in college, you'll fix that, right? We don't do artistic rebellion in this family. It was her way of preserving the Talbot name, not a legacy of warmth, but of image. Always about what things looked like, never what they were. 2 days later, the email arrived. Subject: Family gathering, attendance expected. From Vera Talbot's assistant, no dash reply at talbotlegacy.org. Time: 7:16 a.m. I didn't open it right away. I read the preview on my phone and let it sit the way you might avoid looking directly at a rattlesnake. But by 9 a.m., I knew I couldn't pretend not to see it. The message wasn't a request. It was a summons. A gathering, as she called it, at the house that hadn't felt like mine since I was 16. So I got dressed, not in anything soft or yielding, but in straight lines, black slacks, a fitted jacket, no jewelry. I printed the hospital intake documents. I wasn't sure why, only that it felt right to bring them, proof that he was real, that what I held in my arms 2 nights ago wasn't grief-induced madness. When I pulled into the long stone driveway, nothing had changed. The hedges were clipped with mathematical precision, the lawn unnaturally green despite the fall chill. The house itself loomed quiet, curtains drawn just enough to suggest dignity without warmth. The door opened before I knocked. A maid I didn't recognize nodded and led me into the sunroom. It looked exactly as I remembered, all white and glass, like someone had scrubbed every inch of personality out of it. Vera sat at the head of the table, flanked by Aunt Indira on one side and Corwin on the other. My father's eyes didn't meet mine. "Thank you for coming," Vera said without standing. "We'll keep this brief." I didn't respond. I slid into the chair directly across from her, every muscle tense. She tapped a thin folder in front of her, then pushed it toward me. "This is a proposed family confidentiality agreement." I stared at the folder. No one said anything. Indira folded her hands neatly. Corwin adjusted his glasses, still avoiding my gaze. "You're distributing NDAs now?" I asked, voice flat. "It's a formality," Vera replied, smoothing her skirt. "Given recent events and the unfortunate misunderstandings around Isolde's circumstances." "She died," I said. "That's not a circumstance." Her jaw tightened, just a twitch. "She made choices. Poor ones. But we are a family, and families protect each other, even when the consequences are difficult." I opened the folder. My name was already typed on the signature page. "In exchange for signing," she continued, "your trust will be released early. The Talbot estate will ensure your financial future remains intact." "And if I don't sign?" She met my eyes then. "Cool. Even. You'll be removed from all current and future estate considerations, including property, insurance, any legal benefits. You're buying my silence." "I'm ensuring stability," she corrected, "for everyone involved." Corwin cleared his throat, finally speaking. "It's not a punishment, Ria. It's a practical solution." Aunt Indira chimed in with that tight smile she wore like a mask. "It's what Isolde would have wanted, for this family to stay intact." I stood slowly. "You don't know what Isolde wanted. You didn't even believe she was pregnant." "That child," Vera began, but I held up a hand. "You don't get to say what he is." Vera stood too. "Sometimes we have to choose between being a daughter and being a liability." I looked at the paper again. For a second, I almost laughed. There it was, my entire worth in dollars and hush clauses. "If love had been part of this family contract," I said, folding the document neatly, "maybe I'd sign it." I placed it back on the table untouched. My hands were steady, but my legs felt like they might give at any moment. Vera didn't flinch. You've always been too sentimental to survive in this world. No, I said softly. I've just never wanted to survive by becoming you. No one followed me when I walked out. Outside, the wind was biting. I didn't have a scarf, didn't need one. I let the cold burn my face as I walked back to the car, each step slicing through something I hadn't been able to name before. In that moment, I knew what it meant to be truly alone in a room full of people who shared your blood. And yet, strangely, I felt lighter. I hadn't just lost a sister, I was beginning to lose my whole family. By the time I got back to my apartment, the sky had gone fully gray. Rain tapped against the windows in slow, steady pulses, as if even the weather had grown tired of pretending. I dropped my coat over the back of the kitchen chair and stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at the silence like it owed me an explanation. I still hadn't unpacked the bag from the hospital. The scarf I'd wrapped Malric in was crumpled at the bottom, stained and faded. I left it there. Instead, I walked to the couch, sat down with my phone in hand, and stared at my father's name on the screen. I didn't want to call. I wanted him to call me, to say, I heard what happened. Are you okay? But Corwin Talbot wasn't that kind of father. He was a man who believed that staying neutral meant staying noble. Still, I pressed the button. The call rang 5 times before he picked up. Ria, he said, like he was answering a work call he hadn't scheduled. Hi, I replied. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else in another room. He waited. Not a single, "How are you?" or "I've been meaning to call." Just silence, waiting for me to speak first. "I need to talk to you about the baby," I said. More silence. Then a slow exhale. I was hoping that wasn't true. "It is." Another pause. I could almost hear him pinching the bridge of his nose, the way he always did when avoiding something uncomfortable. "I found him," I added, my throat dry. "He was alive. She put him in the lake, Dad. I know what your mother did." That stopped me. "You knew." "I suspected," he said quietly, "but I didn't want to believe it. She left a newborn to die." "I know," he said again. "Ria, don't drag this out. Let it go." I stood, phone pressed hard against my ear. "You want me to let it go?" "She's your mother. We don't always understand her reasons, but she tried to kill a child. She tried to protect the family." There it was, the word they always defaulted to, family. Like it was some holy banner under which all sins could be forgiven, so long as the curtain stayed closed and the press stayed out. "You think that's what protection looks like?" I asked, my voice sharpening. He didn't answer. "Don't make your mother the villain," he finally said, soft and rehearsed. "It won't change anything." "It already did," I snapped. "I can't do this with you, Ria. I don't want to pick sides." "You already did," I said and hung up. I stood there in the middle of my apartment, the silence now louder than ever. A part of me had still held out hope, faint and foolish, that he might see this for what it was. But Corwin had spent his life avoiding the sharp edges of conflict. He wasn't about to start now. An hour passed. I don't remember what I did during it. Maybe sat, maybe stared at the wall, maybe cried. I must have dozed off because when the knock came, it startled me upright. 3 soft raps measured. I opened the door to find Aunt Indira standing there, holding a tray with 2 teacups and a worn photo album tucked under her arm. She smiled like nothing was wrong. "Thought you could use company." I should have said no. Should have closed the door and gone back to pretending I had no more family. But some part of me, the part that remembered her sneaking me cookies when Vera wasn't looking, stepped aside. She walked in like she'd done it 1,000 times, set the tray on the table, placed the album beside it, then sat down on the edge of my couch like a therapist about to begin a session. "I've been thinking about your sister," she began. "She was always the stubborn one, wasn't she?" I didn't answer. Indira sipped her tea. "Remember that time she cut all her hair off the week before your parents' anniversary photos?" Vera nearly lost her mind. "She was trying to make a point," I said quietly. Indira smiled, not unkindly. "Yes, and she did. Isolde was always very loud." "She was honest," I corrected. There was a pause. Then Indira leaned forward, clasping her hands like she was about to share a deep secret. Listen, Ria. What happened? What's happening? It's not easy for any of us. Easy, I repeated. Someone left a child to die, and we're using the word easy. She didn't mean to. She did, I said. She meant to. She planned it. She dressed it up in cloth and carried it like garbage. Indira inhaled slowly. Vera is doing what she's always done, protecting the name. This family has survived worse. You know that. I laughed. One sharp, humorless burst. That's your pitch. We've swept worse under the rug, so let's keep sweeping. She's your mother. No, I said. She's a brand manager who happens to share DNA with me. Indira's eyes narrowed. Don't be cruel, Ria. I stood. Cruel as watching a baby turn blue because someone thought he didn't fit the family portrait. She rose too, smoothing her blouse. I came here to help. To offer a bridge. Bridge to where? Back to silence. She'll make it up to you, Indira said. Eventually. Just step back from all this. Quietly. Let it fade. And Malric? I asked. She flinched, just slightly. He was never meant to be part of this, she whispered. That broke something in me. I walked to the door, opened it wide. Ria. I didn't ask for tea, I said. She hesitated, then picked up the tray, leaving the photo album behind. When the door clicked shut, I stood for a while, staring at the spot she'd been sitting. Then I picked up the album and dropped it in the trash. In that moment, I rewrote the Talbot family album. Not with pictures, with absences. Every face that had once looked like love now looked like a stranger. They had chosen erasure. If everyone I loved was willing to erase him, then I had to be the one who wrote him into the world. The next morning, I woke before the sun. My apartment was still cloaked in the blue hush of pre-dawn, but I couldn't lie still. Sleep had become a stranger anyway, just like half the people who shared my last name. I dressed quickly. Jeans, hoodie, boots. Not because I had anywhere to be, but because I did. I needed proof. Everything they had tried to bury, Isolde, the baby, the truth. I had to dig it back up, even if it meant scraping with bare hands. So I made coffee, left it untouched, grabbed my keys, and drove to the lake. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled off near the trailhead. The air was sharp, filled with pine and damp earth. I walked slowly, scanning everything. The water, the trees, the slope of the hill where the mourners had stood just days ago. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Some mark on the shore. A shred of cloth. It was foolish. But as I followed the path toward the private boathouses tucked behind the tall reeds, something caught my eye. A faded "Beware of Dog" sign hanging loosely from a chain-link gate, and above it, a small, rusted camera bolted to the boathouse roof. My heart skipped. I climbed the steps to the porch and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open. An older man with a white beard and suspenders stood there, holding a can of paint. He looked me up and down. You lost. No, sir, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I was at a funeral here a few days ago. My family. I think your camera might have caught something important. He raised an eyebrow. You talking about the Talbot funeral? I nodded. Yes. I'm Ria. His gaze softened, just a little. You're the quiet one. That made me pause. Excuse me. You didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just watched, he said. I noticed things. I took a breath. Then maybe you noticed what happened after. When everyone left. He looked at me long and hard, then stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in. The tapes roll on motion. I ain't touched them. Inside, the boathouse smelled like old wood and lemon oil. A small TV sat on a workbench, connected to a clunky DVR system. He pulled up the playback. There, I said, pointing to the timestamp, about 10 minutes after the funeral. The footage was grainy, but it was enough. Vera appeared, walking alone down the slope. She held the box carefully, then paused, looked around, and tossed it into the lake like she was discarding yesterday's trash. I didn't breathe for a full minute. Then the old man handed me a flash drive. I don't want any trouble, he said, but I hate lies more than I hate noise. Thank you, I whispered. You just saved a life. Back home, I plugged the drive into my laptop and paused it on the frame where Vera's hands were empty. The space between her and the water suddenly spoke louder than any of her justifications. I needed more. I turned toward the hallway closet where I kept a box of Isolde's things. Most of it was random. Art books, tangled necklaces, paintbrushes with hardened tips. But she had always kept journals, and I remembered one in particular that looked like a poetry collection. I flipped through pages filled with her handwriting until something fell out. A cream envelope with my name. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a letter to me. It was addressed, "For you if I'm not there." Inside, I found a folded note written in careful, uneven script. "Dear little one, if you're reading this, it means I'm not with you, and that breaks me in more ways than words can hold. You were never a mistake. You were joy, even when no one wanted to admit it. Your father loved you. He tried to be here, but they shut him out the way. They try to shut out everything that doesn't fit their picture. I hope one day you find your way back to the truth. Love always. Your mom, Isolde." Tucked behind the letter was a blank birth certificate form. No hospital stamp. No signatures. Just printed fields and empty lines. That was enough for me. I pinned the letter to my wall next to the still image from the video footage. The living room now looked less like a home and more like a crime board. I didn't care. I didn't need candles or throw pillows. I needed justice. They thought silence would keep them safe, I said aloud. But silence only works when no one's listening. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and began sketching out a plan. I didn't have money. I didn't have lawyers. But I had truth and a timeline, a video, a letter, and a baby breathing in a hospital crib, holding on to life like he'd been waiting for me to show up. I wasn't going to fight them with noise. I was going to end them with truth. The day of the memorial came quicker than I expected. My mother didn't waste time. She never did. When she wanted to rewrite history, she moved fast, like she was afraid the truth might start talking before she finished editing it. The public gallery downtown had been transformed into what looked like a celebration, not a remembrance. White lilies, silver ribbons, giant prints of Isolde's smiling face, all perfectly arranged under banners that read "The Art of Light, remembering Isolde Talbot." There was even a catered buffet. Vera always believed grief needed good lighting and hors d'oeuvres. I stood near the back, pretending to blend into the crowd of investors, donors, and socialites who had come to mourn a woman they'd never known. Their voices buzzed in the air, soft and polite. Nobody talked about the months Isolde was missing, or the baby she'd carried, or the way the Talbots had gone silent when she vanished. Vera stood on stage in her black dress, the picture of composure. Her voice carried like a sermon. "Isolde was our son," she said. "She saw beauty where others saw chaos. She left us her art, her light, her legacy." I wanted to laugh. Isolde had been chaos, real, messy, brilliant. Not this varnished saint my mother was selling. But I stayed still, clutching the small frame in my hands. The photo inside wasn't one of the ones from Vera's curated gallery. It was one I'd found in a shoebox at Isolde's studio. My sister was sitting by the window, sunlight spilling across her shoulder, cradling a baby swaddled in a white blanket. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired, but her smile looked alive. When the speech ended and the applause began, I moved forward. My heels clicked on the polished floor, echoing louder than I intended. People turned. I didn't care. Vera was stepping down from the podium when she saw me. Surprise flickered in her eyes for a fraction of a second before she rearranged her face back into that calm, public version of herself. "Ria," she said softly, as if greeting a lost child at a church service. I didn't answer. I walked past her, straight to the table covered in floral arrangements and framed photographs. The curated version of my sister. All light, no shadow. I placed my frame at the center of the display. My voice came out steady, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. This part of her story deserves a place, too. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's camera clicked. Vera's hand twitched toward me, but froze midway, her smile tightening. The gallery filled with the kind of silence that cuts more than noise. Then, like nothing had happened, she turned toward the audience and said, "Thank you all for being here. Please, enjoy the refreshments." I stepped back into the crowd. My pulse was pounding, but my body felt strangely calm. I had done it. The truth was out. Quietly, but unmistakably. By evening, the photo was everywhere. Someone had posted it online with the caption, "Who's the baby in Sol Talbot's arms?" And within hours, local news sites were running the story. Some headlines were respectful, others cruel. One read, "Family Scandal Clouds Talbot Legacy." I watched the coverage from my apartment, the TV light flickering across my walls. It should have felt like victory, but instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a storm you knew you'd started. By midnight, Vera's counterattack began. Her PR team released a statement calling the photo a private moment misinterpreted by an emotionally unstable family member. Then came the interviews, the anonymous sources, the bloggers repeating phrases like unreliable, disturbed, jealous. Comments poured in online. She's bitter her sister was more successful. Typical black sheep trying to grab attention. Poor woman, grief makes people do strange things. Some voices defended me, said the photo looked too real to ignore. But those were drowned out by the noise of Vera's machine, smooth, polished, well-funded noise. The next afternoon, my phone rang. It was her. "Ria." Her tone was almost maternal. "Almost. You've made your decision. Now you need to understand the consequences." "You mean consequences for you," I said. "For all of us," she corrected. "You've taken something private and made it public. You've humiliated this family." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You did that when you threw a child into a lake." She inhaled sharply. "You think you know the truth, but you don't understand what you've stepped into. You're not prepared for what happens next." "I understand exactly what I've stepped into," I said, "and I'm not stepping out." A pause. Then, softly, "You've always been so dramatic." "I learn from the best," I replied and hung up. I walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over Asheville, painting everything in soft orange and gold. Cars rolled past. People laughed on the sidewalk, living their quiet, unedited lives. For a moment, I envied them. Then I remembered I didn't have that luxury anymore. My mother had built an empire on silence, on polished statements and perfect photos. I had no money, no lawyers, no PR team. But I had the one thing she couldn't control, evidence. She buried her daughter once. I won't let her bury the truth the same way. By the next morning, the gallery chaos had rippled through town like oil and water, shiny, fast-spreading, and hard to clean up. News anchors recited the same lines with practiced solemnity. A stunning development in the Talbot family memorial. Others got more creative. Legacy versus lies, the baby in the frame. My phone buzzed nonstop. I didn't answer. The only call I wanted wasn't coming. I needed to shift from reaction to action, and that meant legal steps. If I was going to keep Malric, if I was going to protect him from Vera, I had to start laying the groundwork now. So I called the hospital. I told them I needed Malric's full medical file to begin guardianship proceedings. There was a pause on the other end, the kind that always makes your stomach drop. The voice that finally responded didn't sound apologetic, just confused. "The file shows the child was listed as no named Doe. Parental information is blank." "That can't be right," I said. "I was there." The intake nurse asked me to give a name. I said Talbot. "Ma'am," the clerk replied, "that's not what's in the system." I thanked her, hung up, sat there. I knew what this meant. Someone had gone in after the fact and changed the record, which meant they were trying to erase not just Malric's identity, but mine too. As if neither of us had ever existed inside that story. Rage came first. Hot, unfiltered. Then, right behind it, clarity. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. I hadn't been to a Sol storage unit since we cleaned out her apartment. Most of the things we didn't know what to do with, her art, tax records, odds and ends, had ended up in a rented locker on the edge of town. The place was nearly empty when I arrived. Rain had just started again, soft and steady, coating everything in a dull shine. I punched in the code, rolled up the creaky door, and stepped inside. Boxes stacked in awkward towers. A few cracked canvases leaning against the far wall. One plastic bin was labeled tax year, private in her handwriting. I sat on the concrete floor and opened it. Receipts, old W-2s, insurance papers. At the very bottom, I found a thin folder. Inside was a discharge summary from Asheville General. My hand stilled. It listed her as the patient. Date matched her last known hospital visit. But under father, the name had been blacked out deliberately. Someone had taken a thick black marker to it. I held the page up to the light. Barely, just barely, I could make out the ghost of the name underneath. Ames Lattimore. There it was. The name she'd said between sobs once, when she thought I was asleep. The man everyone else had called a mistake. I pulled out my phone and searched for his name in my sister's journals, flipping pages until I found a torn corner with digits scrawled in pencil. Ames, don't lose this. I dialed. Voicemail. I tried again. This time, someone picked up. Hello. The voice was wary. Is this Ames? I asked. Who is this? My name is Rhea Talbot. I'm a soul sister. Silence. Then the rustle of movement, like someone standing too quickly. She's gone, I said before he could ask. I'm sorry. I know you probably didn't. I knew, he interrupted, voice suddenly tight. They wouldn't let me see her. Wouldn't return my calls. I knew something happened. But I didn't know about. There's a child, I said. A boy. His name is Mallory. The silence on the line shifted. He breathed in, sharp and shaky. She kept the name. Yes. A sound broke through then. Not quite a sob. Something caught between anger and grief. Where is he? In protective care. But I need your help. I found a medical record that had your name erased. They're trying to scrub him from the record completely. My name's on that, he asked. Barely. They tried to blot it out. But it's there. And I need you to confirm it. I will, he said without hesitation. I've got old texts, emails, even a voicemail where Vera warned me to stay away for the family's good. I didn't delete any of it. When can we meet? Tonight, he said. Send me the address. I'll bring everything. I did. After hanging up, I stared at the wall where the letter from a soul still hung next to the printed frame of Vera throwing the box into the lake. They'd used a black marker like it could fix everything. Like ink could undo flesh and breath and blood. They tried to erase him with a marker. I'll write him in with fire if I have to. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. By 8:15, the courthouse steps were already lined with people, some holding signs, some holding cameras. A few stood there in silence, their faces unreadable. I pulled into the lot behind the building, parked in the corner, and sat in the car for a minute before opening the door. Ames was already waiting near the side entrance, hands buried in his jacket pockets. He looked thinner than I remembered from his soul's old Polaroids, older, too. Grief-age's people. You ready? I asked as I walked up. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. About as much as I'll ever be. Luella arrived minutes later, calm as ever. She nodded at me, then at Ames, and took her place without a word. She wasn't family, but she had more right to be in that room than half the people Vera had ever called blood. Inside, the courtroom was quiet, too quiet, not like the drama-filled TV versions. This was family court, smaller, more clinical, more tense. A handful of reporters sat in the back with press passes clipped to their shirts. Vera sat in front with her lawyer, a man who looked like he'd been pulled from central casting, silver hair, navy suit, pockets square folded like a flag. She didn't look at me. The judge, Honorable Marion Decker, tapped her fingers against the file in front of her. Miss Talbot, she said. Mr. Lattimore, I understand you are petitioning for temporary guardianship of the minor child referred to as Baby Doe. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Ames echoed the same beside me. Mr. Carter, the judge addressed Vera's lawyer, your client is contesting? He stood. Your Honor, the Talbot family contends that the situation surrounding this child is the result of deep emotional trauma, misunderstandings, and grief. My client believed she was acting in the child's best interest under extraordinary circumstances. Throwing him into a lake is what you're calling extraordinary circumstances, I said, unable to stop myself. The judge raised a hand. Miss Talbot, we will get to that. I nodded, lips pressed tight. Ames was first. He spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the tremor behind it. He explained how Vera had cut off contact, blocked his calls, redirected mail. how every attempt to reach Isolde had been met with silence or threats. Then he played the voicemail. "I'll handle it," Vera's voice said, smooth as glass. "It'll be quiet. Just don't make noise. Don't ruin what we're trying to protect." It played in the courtroom like a funeral bell. I presented the discharge papers, the hospital records erased. Then the version with Ames's name barely visible under the marker. Then the photo of Vera at the lake. The video of her walking back without the box. Nobody in that room breathed while the screen played. When the judge finally spoke again, her voice had shifted, cooler, sharper. "I'm granting temporary joint guardianship to Miss Talbot and Mr. Lattimore, effective immediately." Vera's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we respectfully—" "Sit down," Judge Decker said. "Miss Talbot, Mr. Lattimore, you will maintain physical custody. The child will not be transferred or removed without court order. Miss Vera Talbot is restricted from contact until further review." The gavel hit the block with a sharp finality. It didn't feel like winning. Not entirely, but it felt like air had returned to the room. Afterward, outside the courthouse, the wind had picked up. I held Malric's carrier in both hands, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes fluttering beneath the fleece. Vera approached. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She just walked toward me like it was another one of her staged moments, another time to control the narrative. "This isn't over," she said, quiet and firm. "It is," I replied. "For me. For him. And one day, you'll wake up and realize that's all that ever mattered." She flinched. Not visibly, but enough. Luella stepped beside me. Ames hovered behind, his posture protective in a way that didn't feel performative. A small group of protesters stood across the street. Someone chanted, "Protect the truth!" Vera turned and walked away. That day, Vera didn't just lose a case. She lost the narrative she used to control us all. After the courthouse emptied and the noise faded, life didn't snap back into place. It never does after something like that. There's no cinematic swell of music or grand applause. Just a slow unfolding of days where your shoulders lower, breath deepens, and grief morphs into something quieter. A month passed. The air had cooled, real fall now. Not just the calendar's promise, but the bite in the breeze, the rustle of brittle leaves skimming across sidewalks, the gray mornings that didn't warm until noon. My apartment looked different in this light. Brighter. Not because I'd redecorated or rearranged the furniture, but because there was life in it now. Malric was the reason. He slept in a bassinet beside my bed, his tiny chest rising and falling like it was conducting the whole rhythm of my days. Every morning, I woke to the softest rustling noises, fingers brushing the side of the crib, little huffs of air. He wasn't fussy, just present, steady. Ames came by often. Not every day, but more than I expected. He brought formula sometimes, or diapers he found on sale, and once, a plush dog with button eyes that made Malric coo. He didn't try to be perfect, and I didn't need him to be. We were all bruised, none of us healed, but he was real. That counted for more than people like Vera ever understood. Luella and I still spoke every Sunday. She'd ask, "He eating better? Or are you sleeping at all?" And then pivot into gossip about her neighbor's dog or a new pie recipe she was testing. She never asked for details about the court case, never said, "I told you so." She just showed up. It was a quiet routine. Simple. Honest. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something instead of trying to keep something from falling apart. One morning, as the kettle hissed and I held Malric in my arms, I told him about his mother. Not everything. Just enough. "She loved thunderstorms," I whispered, brushing my fingers over his cheek. "She said the sky should cry loud when it needed to." He blinked up at me. I kept talking. "She painted our bathroom mirror once with sunrise colors. Said mornings needed more beauty. Your mom wasn't quiet. Not like me. She made noise in the best way." And then, in that stillness, he smiled. His first. Not gas. Not a twitch. A real smile. Wide. Gummy. Full of light. I froze. Tears sprang so fast I laughed through them. My chest cracked open in the most beautiful ache. "Hi," I whispered. Miracla." That afternoon, I packed a small bag, bundled him up in the soft yellow blanket Ames had brought, and we drove to the lake. The water was low now. The shoreline exposed bits of rock and driftwood. I parked and carried him down the path. Near the spot where Vera had stood with that box, I placed something of my own. A small painting, Isolde's last, the one she never signed. It showed an open window, a bird mid-flight, colors bleeding into one another like morning meeting sky. I left it leaned against a smooth stone and whispered, "You were never the mistake." Vera wasn't in jail. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she was gone. From public life. From legacy. From relevance. Her empire of silence had fallen, not with fire, but with facts. Corwin never called. Not once. Indira sent flowers after the hearing, a simple bouquet with no card. I tossed them in the trash. As I stood by the lake, the wind picked up. Malric's eyes blinked slowly against the breeze. I pressed my lips to his forehead. "You'll never have to wonder if you mattered," I told him. "Not while I breathe." That night, after I fed him and the apartment had settled into its warm hum, I wrote a letter. "Dear Isolde, you were never the mistake. Neither is he. You just lived in a house that couldn't handle your kind of truth. But I could. I still do. I wish you could see him. He has your eyes when he stares at the ceiling like it's full of stars. He smiled today, like he knew he was safe. I'm going to raise him with the kind of love we only dreamed of. No lies, no shame, no branding people as liabilities. Just truth. I hope wherever you are, you feel it. Love. Ria." I folded it carefully, placed it in a small ceramic bowl, and lit the edge with a match. The paper curled, darkened, then dissolved into smoke. I opened the window and let it go. We didn't need the Talbot name anymore. We had each other and the truth. Some families would rather bury the truth than face it, no matter the cost. But silence doesn't protect legacies, it poisons them. In the end, the lie didn't just unravel the Talbot name. It set fire to everything it tried to preserve. So here's the question. Have you ever been told to keep it quiet for the family's sake? What did staying silent cost you? If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you reflect, subscribe for more powerful true-to-life stories just like this.